Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Thursday, the 13th day of June, 2024. And as always, we have some very important headlines that have taken place in the last few hours that we all need to know about, because what it does is continue to set the stage for what the Bible said is going to happen at the time of the end. That is before the second coming of Jesus Christ and the events that relate to it. God has laid this out for us. As Jesus said in John 16 to his disciples, I've told you these things ahead of time, so when they do take place, you won't lose your faith. And we're very excited, aren't we, to have the Bible to study, to look at, to know. So we realize what events are going to take place in the future, and we know that God is in control of all things. All right, we're going to look at the latest news on the Biden ceasefire deal with Israel and Hamas, the one that Hamas has rejected. We find another major country is about to pledge support for a Palestinian state. Egypt's relationship with Israel is growing colder and colder by the day. And who does benefit from a hostage deal? Who exactly? We're all going to also see that with over 300 projectiles shot towards Israel in just the last 2 days from Lebanon, Iran now comes on the picture and warns Israel not to attack Lebanon. It's all very, very interesting as we get into these stories. All right, the first one, the G7. Joe Biden says Hamas is the one who has to move on a ceasefire deal. U.S. President Joe Biden said he discussed the Gaza ceasefire during the Group of Seven summit and that he has not lost hope, but that Hamas, their terror group, has to step up. Asked if he was confident, Biden says no, Hamas has to move. Now, I'm glad he's saying that because Hamas does have to move. Israel's ready to make a lot of concessions. Hamas doesn't want to make any of them. Now, also what we find as the days go by, little drips and drabs, more of what Hamas, how they responded, their written response. It hasn't been published yet people have seen it, to the Biden plan. And we see this. Negotiations are stuck on Hamas's demand for Israel's upfront commitment to permanent truce. In other words, they want first and foremost a commitment before they do anything for a permanent truce from Israel. In other words, no just temporary ceasefire, permanent truce. Now, the terror group has reportedly demanded expedited schedule for the IDF to leave Gaza. This is kind of new, their schedule, insisting on a withdrawal in the first week of the deal, with Russia, China, and Turkey to act as guarantors. In addition, Lebanon's Al Akbar outlet reported that Hamas is demanding that the IDF start its withdrawal from the Gaza Strip on day one of the first phase, with the key Salah ad-Din and al-Rashid highways. In other words, get out from there. The army facilities at Netzarim, that's what basically divides the country from north and south. The Philadelphia route along the Egypt-Gaza border that keeps Hamas now from bringing in anything from Egypt, smuggling in weapons, smuggling in money, smuggling in munitions, smuggling in people, smuggling in a little bit of everything, and smuggling people out to Egypt too. They want that done, and the Rafah border crossing, they want it all vacated by the seventh day. Those main arteries, the split down the middle where Hamas is now divided between North and South. Israel has done this. In other words, all the advances that Israel made during the time the IDF, the war was in Rafah, in Gaza, whether it be in Khan Yunis, whether it be in some other place in Gaza, all these great things that they've done to basically, hurt the army of Hamas, hurt them deadly, destroy a number of their tunnels, destroy thousands of their soldiers. All that will be for naught because, according to Hamas, the plan can't go forward. We will not release any hostages until Israel leaves, and they get 7 days to leave, and they have to leave all these areas that they've made advances on, and then Hamas says we will start releasing hostages. That is their demand. We'll see. So it's pretty depressing, isn't it? And that's why Israel today, as we had our story, was very pessimistic about the possibility of any type of agreement. Because even as Anthony Blinken said, they're asking things that are impossible, that are non-starters for Israel and non-starters for the West, because they're demanding not only these things, but demanding to stay in power so they can do October 7th all over again. Now, with this background, we have the UK party, the Labour Party in the UK pledges to recognize a Palestinian state as part of a peace process. On July 4th, there'll be a major election in the UK. It looks like the Labour Party will replace the Tory party ruling the country. And in doing so, they're going to bring in socialism. The leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, has basically said he's a socialist and they want to bring in a socialist rule. In fact, there's a real fear because there could be an overwhelming victory for the Socialist Labor Party, that it may be impossible for any party in the future ever to come back and win a victory. There's things they could do to make it kind of like a one-party rule in the whole country, a socialist party. And this would fit with what the Bible has to say about the time of the end. Remember, globalism, socialism, same type of thing. What you have countries joining together, countries losing their sovereignty, countries giving up their freedoms. And sadly, this is kind of where the UK is going. And so what they've said, Labor has said, they will recognize a Palestinian state as a contribution to a renewed peace process. Palestinian statehood is an inalienable right for the Palestinian people, said Labor's election manifesto. What a bunch of nonsense. And as an inalienable right, there's no such thing as the Palestinian people. Yasser Arafat, the head of the PLO, was born in Egypt. There's never been a Palestinian people, never been a Palestinian governance, never been a Palestinian state, never been, a Palestinian language. It is something that's just been made up since Israel became a modern state in 1948. And so anyway, we deal with that also too in our book, 25 Signs. We're near the end. In one of our appendices, who are the Palestinians? We talk about them, their history, who they're at, and then, of course, as we said earlier, the right that Israel has to the promised land. We have that in one of the appendices, as we do in our first book in the series, God Wants Us to Know the Future, Appendix 1. Why is it important, the agreement God made with Abraham and his descendants? And so all that helps us understand what God has said. The promised land belongs to Israel, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to their, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their descendants. And so that's where that's what God said. It's irrevocable. And so recognizing their inalienable right is absolute nonsense. But they say we're committed to recognizing a Palestinian state as a contribution to a renewed peace process, which results in a two-state solution with a safe and secure Israel alongside. What a joke that is. With the Palestinian Authority wanting to destroy Israel, with the Hamas and their charter says they want to destroy Israel, it's just not going to happen. All right, so anyway, they're heading for socialist rule. We'll see. Now, what's also interesting, headline number 4, Israel and Egypt's cold peace turns frigid. Relations between Jerusalem and Cairo have always been lukewarm, let's face that. But since the war, anti-Israeli conspiracy theories and sentiments have surged. However, neither side appears ready to abandon the peace accords just yet. The official statement released by Egypt's foreign ministry over the weekend following the hostage rescue operation was particularly harsh, severe, and frustrating. To Israeli ears, it sounded like a condemnation. Some might even call it a bizarre denunciation of Israel's violation of international law and the IDF strikes on the refugee camp. Not a single word was mentioned about the real reason for the operation in the camp. Now, there are times since the peace treaty that they made in 1979, Israel and Egypt, when it's been called a cessation of fighting, cessation of wars. And we do know this from Scripture. And our 25 signs were near the end. We talk about this in sign number 2. As nations have done to Israel, so God will do to them. And we talk about 5 specific nations in the past that have attempted to destroy Israel: the Philistines, the Moabites, the Edomites, the Ammonites, and the Amalekites. All of them have attempted to destroy Israel in the past. And what God did, he pronounced judgment on all of them. They've all lost their national identity. They don't exist anymore as sovereign nations. 2 nations that do exist and will exist to the end that the Bible talks about and has talked about for thousands of years are Israel and Egypt. They both exist. In fact, there is a wonderful future for Egypt, as we talk about in our 50, it's the one, God's Work in History. 50 biblical prophecies made and fulfilled. How about there's predictions that have been fulfilled and then will be fulfilled in the future with respect to Egypt? So Egypt still has a plan and purpose in God's, what's going to take place. And also, too, more than that, in our book, look up 50, what's it called? I can't think of all the names of my books. Look up a timeline of 50 major events that are going to take place in the future. And this is where the one where we really talk about Egypt. It's that one more than the God's Work in History. That in our Look Up book, which is also about last days Bible prophecy, it's a timeline of 50 coming events that the Bible predicts. And one of the events is Egypt actually entering into a relationship with the living God at the time of the end. So we know that's going to happen, but right now it's not really good. Now, our next story is a opinion piece, and it's a wonderful thing. It's from Ynet. I'm going to read it to you because it kind of lays everything out. And it asks the question, something we talk about here all the time, but this person puts in another perspective, pretty much similar to what we've said. Who would truly benefit? Who would truly benefit from a hostage deal? And here's what the writer says. He says, an agreement that leaves Hamas intact as a governing force in Gaza sets the stage for another October 7th style attack. Only sustained and uncompromising military action combined with continuous pressure on Hamas will secure the release of all hostages, living and deceased. Now, this next paragraph is going to shock a lot of people if you haven't heard this in the past. Since the Yom Kippur War in October of 1973, the U.S. has made great efforts to prevent Israel from emerging stronger. Did you know that? Including suspending the airlift. U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger was later quoted as telling the Soviet ambassador that his nightmare was an Israeli victory in the war. And that's the Yom Kippur War in 1973. In fact, Kissinger got in very quickly and stopped the battle, stopped the war when Israel was making its advances. In fact, they're on their way to Damascus, Syria in the north, and Cairo, Egypt in the south. They're winning the war. They're taking over all this territory. Kissinger quickly worked with the UN and had a peace called at that particular time. Interesting that the U.S. and someone's going to ask, well, why are they doing that? And that's a great question. Why doesn't the U.S. want to see Israel stronger? Well, anyway, the writer says, even now, here we are 50 years down the line, even now it appears that the U.S. aims to maintain the Hamas threat in southern Israel by preventing an unequivocal Israeli victory. This has been done by stopping arms and ammunition shipments, imposing restrictions on the use of American-made weapons, and assisting Hamas through supplies sent under the guise of, quote, humanitarian aid to Gaza residents, which clearly end up with Hamas, with the terrorists. Now, the push for a deal to return the hostages home seems to follow the pattern. The result is a weakened Israel, more easily manipulated into decisions that serve Washington's interest but are contrary to their own. Hamas's response to the latest U.S. draft of the hostage release agreement is diplomatic, appearing to say yes while clearly meaning no, as we've talked about. In standard Arabic, this is interesting, there's no word for compromise, and Hamas does not intend to come up with one now. The group will not be satisfied until all its demands are met and its conditions fulfilled. With pressure directed solely at Israel and not at Hamas, except for vague demands through Qatar, there is no incentive for Hamas to accept any other agreement. And that's exactly what we've been saying. And the writer goes on to say, initially, Hamas felt it was in an existential danger in the early days of the war. However, it now sees no benefit in ending the fighting. Receiving direct aid from the U.S. and broad international support, while the IDF operates under impossible restrictions, creates an ideal situation for Hamas. Even Gaza Strip residents who initially expressed suffering now view Hamas as effectively challenging Israel and exacting a high price. At first glance, it seems that all the hostages, both the living and deceased, will return to Israel. In reality, and this is what we've said too, this outcome is highly doubtful. However, a deal resulting in the release of hundreds of prisoners from Israeli jails, including senior terrorists with blood on their hands, would significantly bolster Hamas, which has lost thousands of fighters in recent months. Under these conditions, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar is likely to thwart any deal once he feels he has extracted all that he can, leaving some Israeli hostages and bodies as leverage for the future. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? But that's exactly what they'll do. It is now clear to everyone that Hamas will remain a governing terrorist force in the Gaza Strip, reinforced by released prisoners, injecting new energy into its ranks, and continuing to threaten Israel, particularly the South. Despite carrying out a horrific attack on the state of Israel, the worst since the Holocaust, Hamas receives one prize after another instead of being wiped off the face of the earth. This serves U.S. interests in limiting Israel's power, as crazy as it sounds. As senior Hamas official Ghazi Hamad said in an interview with Lebanon's LBC channel at the beginning of the fighting, referring to the October 7th offensive, there will also be a second, third, and fourth time. With such perceived success, there is no doubt that this is what Hamas will do. So what does Israel have to do? And here's the key. Only powerful and uncompromising military action throughout the Gaza Strip, combined with continuous pressure on Hamas, will lead to the release of all hostages, living and deceased, aiming to destroy Hamas or at least expel its leadership outside of the borders of the country. Another option, any other option, would endanger the state of Israel and its residents, as well as the broader free world by emboldening this non-state terrorist organization and totalitarian regime that observes the consequences faced by those who invade another country to massacre its people. In other words, what it does, it sets a deadly precedent for other countries. What about groups in other countries that want to, take over the regime and rule from just without the rule of law and just by force, by terror, do this? If Hamas is allowed to stand, this is what could occur. It's going to be the old domino effect. And again, a lot of people, what they continue to say is, we've said it here, why is Hamas treated like a political entity, like there's some normal, political group or normal organization? They're a terrorist group, a bunch of murdering terrorists, and they should be treated as such. They should be consistently condemned, which they're not. And as we've seen everything turn on its head, Israel, the victim, has turned into the bad guy here. And so it was an excellent opinion piece, and it was from Ynet. And who would truly benefit from a hostage deal? It certainly won't be Israel. Now, we got other problems going on, as we mentioned this morning. Over 100 more rockets have rained in from Lebanon today as sirens wail incessantly across northern Israel. Air defenses have shot down several rockets. Others have landed in fields. Hezbollah claims they have targeted 15 military sites in the Golan and Gaza and some 150 rockets at Israel since the morning hours, in the largest attack since the war began. So that means in the last 2 days, there have been over about 350 projectiles that have been sent, rockets, mortars, and drones towards Israel. The residents reported seeing Air Force fighter jets pursuing drones infiltrating from Lebanon. Amid ongoing sirens, the municipality announced the suspension of classes and the closure of the city market. Buildings in several areas in the north part of the country sustained direct hits, and damage has been reported. The Magen David ambulance service reported 2 men in their 20s were injured by shrapnel in the town of Katsarim in the Golan Heights. The IDF said approximately 40 projectiles were launched toward Galilee, that's way further south, and the Golan Heights area, many of them successfully intercepted, fortunately, by the air defenses. And the bottom line is that this continued heavily today as yesterday. Al Jazeera, citing a Hezbollah source, reported the Shiite terrorist group targeted 15 military sites in the Galilee and the Golan, launching 30 drones and 150 rockets at Israel since the morning hours. Now that's today. Remember, yesterday was something like 230 rockets that were fired towards Israel. So according to one source, this marks Hezbollah's most extensive assault since joining the conflict on October 8th, and added the attack is aimed to deter Israel, and it was in retaliation for the assassination of a senior commander. So, okay, what's Israel going to do? Well, tonight, the Security Cabinet convened Thursday evening amidst incessant Hezbollah rocket fire. They met in Jerusalem at 9 p.m. There hasn't been anything reported yet what they've come up with, but they got to do something. Like Ben Gvir said today, little strikes here and there, these pinpoint strikes aren't going to do it. You have to do something very profound. Now, remember, we had the story of the United States is warning Israel about getting too involved, warning about this increasing. We talked about this today. France is warning them. Other countries have warning them. They'd like to get some type of ceasefire, but this doesn't seem to happen. So what do we see? Who comes to the rescue? Iran. Number 8, Iran's foreign minister warns Israel against attack on Lebanon amidst Hezbollah's attacks. Meanwhile, Iran continues to support attacks on Israel in the region. Of course, Hamas, of course, in the West Bank, that is Judea and Samaria. The new acting foreign minister, Ali Bagheri Khani, is already making his mark on the region. On his first important foreign trip, he is in Iraq this week, and he warned Israel against attacking Lebanon. This comes after Israeli airstrikes killed his senior commander. He has warned that Israel against any attack on Lebanon. They've fired more than 315 rockets in the last 2 days, the 12th and the 13th day of June. He said ramifications could backfire against the Zionists as a result of this conflict. So now we have the threat of Iran getting involved, and that was the worry of the Western countries, and that's why they say, Israel, tamp it down in your response. Well, what are you supposed to do if you have 320 drones, mortars, missiles, rockets coming over, destroying things, and not only in the far north of the country, but coming further south to the area, not past the Golan Heights into the Galilee? In that particular area, it makes life impossible to live. They've got to do something. Israel must respond some way, but the U.S. is saying, now don't get too much involved because we don't want to tamp up the war any more than it is. Well, this is the situation Israel finds itself in, as we have mentioned, which the Bible tells us at the time of the end. Again, sign 21 of our 25 signs, we're near the end. They will be without friends, on their own, isolated, and no one is going to be doing them any favors. And this is the situation they find themselves in today. All right, so we'll see how all this turns out. Tomorrow, we'll see what the result of this security meeting was of the Netanyahu administration, what they plan to do in Lebanon, what, if anything, is going to happen with the Hamas and this proposal that they have rejected. And again, just to see how Israel, tries to fend for itself in a world that hates them and will continue to hate them more and more. As we've always mentioned, please take advantage of our resources on our website, Educating Our World. That's what we want to do, to educate the world with what the Bible has to say about who God is, who Jesus is, what's going to happen in the future. And that's what we're all about. All of the resources are free. Educatingourworld.com. 65 books you can download them under the banner that says read. You can read the books, download them. They're all free. Please take advantage of them, particularly the 12 books on Bible prophecy, so you can understand what's going on. And then if you do that, you'll perfectly be at peace in the sense that you'll know that God is in control of all things, because these things have been predicted ahead of time. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.